Good afternoon, Pepperdine family. It's an honor to welcome Ethan Penner to our Graziadio Executive Speaker Series. Ethan, I would say, is one of the most influential finance professional and a thinker. He's a philosopher, an author, and a friend to me. And he's come into our PGBS several times to give guest talks and also teach a course for us. And it's a privilege to have him here at today's executive speaker. I want to welcome you, Ethan. As always, you're a dear friend and someone I look up to. And thanks for agreeing to have this conversation with us today. So first, I'd like to just give this time to Ethan to just tell us about yourself. But as always, you have a free mic in the sense that I won't hold you to any specific topic. So just people here would like to know a bit of your background. A lot of people do already know you, but here's Ethan.
Thank you very much. So it's a pleasure to be connected to you personally, Dr. Park, and to the Pepperdine family. I'll answer that question very briefly, or as briefly as one can, having had a 38 or 39-year career. I am very well known, I suppose, for having created the commercial mortgage-backed securities market back in the early 1990s. I'm proud of that, perhaps not because of the obvious reasons that one would say, but because it really well exemplified one of my main operational tenets, which is to meet unmet needs. So I think that, as Dr. Park mentioned, and he knows me well, I'm not your typical financier. I'm not your typical business person. I really do approach everything about my life from a philosophical perspective. And in fact, I wrote a book that is really largely philosophical that I'm going to be publishing this year. But the tenet I reference is the one that I call meeting unmet needs. And I think that life is about bringing our best skills to bear for the benefit of the world, right? And at that moment, when we can do that, we have meaning, we have purpose, we're fulfilled, we're joyous. And I think that when we find that, that's the magical moment in a life, and we should be striving for that every single day. In the early 1990s, the world of the real estate market in the world, but in the US, was in a very tough spot. There had been a period of time where anyone who touched real estate lost money, and it was in a multi-year extreme decline, and all lenders abandoned the market at once. They considered real estate to be like the third rail of finance, and you couldn't touch it. And so if you owned real estate in the US in the early 1990s and your loan was maturing, which most loans are on average 5-year kind of rolling maturities. So figure 20% of all loans mature every year in the US real estate market. Over the course of a few-year period, the whole industry requires refinancing. And if there's no lending, then everybody is in a very bad spot. And that's where the industry was in the early 1990s. I had experienced in my kind of career till then, I was fortunate enough to be an instrumental part of the securitization of the residential single-family mortgage market. I first worked for a couple of savings and loans and found my way to Wall Street when the secondary mortgage market really began. And I was in the first group of mortgage-backed securities traders ever on Wall Street. It was an incredible time. I was very fortunate to be in the right place. I learned how important timing was, but I also learned how to pay attention to timing and to find ways to express my skills in a way that was relevant for that time. And I think that's an important lesson. And then when I saw the commercial real estate market falling apart, and I saw that it had lost all of its debt capital, it dawned on me that the same securitization technology and the process of packaging loans and funding them through the issuance of bonds was the way out for the real estate industry. And nobody else really saw it. It's kind of one of those things, another great lesson learned is that everybody believed that securitization worked well for homogeneous assets. And they felt that commercial real estate, which is true, are not homogeneous. They are not. And that securitization would never really work for commercial real estate assets. I obviously believe differently. And I believe that it was it was the only way out. So I was fortunate enough to get some financial backing from some very large financial players that enabled me to have a balance sheet to make loans. And I had enough standing through my prior experience on the residential side with the rating agencies and the bond buyers to persuade them to play along with me. And it was that combination of vision and believing in myself and my vision when nobody else really believed in it, and persuading, the power of persuasion and the persuading skeptical people to kind of come along, that enabled me to create what became about $1 trillion industry out of thin air, just out of my head, and create in my 30s the largest real estate lender in the history of the United States. So that's kind of how I became. I guess that's the history of my career. Well, that's the good history. Like every history has its ups and downs, and I've had my fair share of ups and my fair share of downs. And there are prices that you pay for being a dreamer. To be a dreamer, as I am, you have to trust people. You have to believe in people. And the kind of downside of trusting people and believing in people is you will ultimately be betrayed by people. But it's worth it. It's like if you don't risk, you'll never love, and you'll never be betrayed. And I'd rather love and be betrayed, So I have had both love and I've had betrayal, and I'll take the package that I get because I think that's being alive. So that's the brief summary.
Right, that's awesome. That's so great. So, based on your experience and what you're doing now, just give us a little perspective on where our economy is since post-crisis 2008 and also COVID as well. So how do you view where we are now, and how does that intertwine with your perspective on life and opportunity sets?
Well, you're asking me like, how do I see the world today, correct?
Yes, today, correct.
Yeah,
how we got to where we are, and how do you interpret current situation?
I think that those are two very different questions. So like, how did we get to where we are today is a very, very interesting question that we could probably spend an entire semester in school talking about. But in the interest of keeping it to under a few minutes, I will say this. We're in a very, very tough spot. We're in as tough a spot in America as one could ever imagine. I don't think I would have ever imagined I would see what I see in America today. So how do we get there? And I'd say it's a combination of things. On the financial, economic side, we got there. Well, I guess I would say this is in a lot of ways. We got to some of the same things contributed to our situation in many different ways. One is we bury our heads in the sand, and we just assume that because we're in America, it's all going to work out, right? So we take things for granted. It's like being born into a rich family, right? If you're born into a rich family and you look around you and you say, well, I'm rich, okay? I have a nice house. I take nice vacations. I go first class wherever I go. I have nice clothes. I might even have a vacation home or even a private plane. And you say, well, I'm set, I'm just set. And it becomes very hard to work hard. You become, lazy, you become entitled, all those things. And sure enough, that's why very wealthy families, when you get out a few generations from the creation of that wealth, it usually is most often significantly reduced over time, right? And I think America is going through a sort of similar thing. America got very, very rich. Well, it worked very, very hard, okay? America worked very hard through World War II and probably through the 1970s and maybe even the early 80s. And then America got very rich, okay? Because it worked very hard. And then generations were born into very rich house called America, or the United States of America. And they had no idea how it got that way. And they assumed it would always be that way. And they became complacent about everything. Who was running for political office? And do I really care? I mean, how many times have we all heard, it doesn't matter whether this person wins or that person wins, we're America, we're bigger than that. Well, you know, that's the kind of complacency that breeds the situation we find ourselves in today. Or deficits don't matter, or debts don't matter, or grades don't matter, or achievement doesn't matter, which we hear today. We actually hear crazy things like achievement is racist in its own sense, like, you know, crazy things. So I just think that it kind of gets to one of the things I really wanted to talk about today. If I had to entitle, the one thing I think is most interesting on my mind lately is intersections. And I think that we pay too little attention to intersections. So my career and the success that I described when I created the commercial mortgage-backed securities market really was born from me living at the intersection of two major industries: finance, or capital markets, and real estate. Those are two completely different businesses, okay? And I found that thinking at the intersection of those businesses was magical. It allowed me to have magical success. I think that we pay too little attention to the intersections of things, okay? And it's true in business, but it's also true in everything, right? So if you think about why do we have the debts and deficits we do? Well, to understand that, you have to understand politics, you have to understand human behavior, you know, and you have to be able to make the analogy of the US almost like a third generation wealthy family. And I think that analogy is a pretty good one. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, I think that's how we got there. Mm-hmm. You know, we're in a spot now where we're very wayward. You know, we're not only in a tough financial spot, we're in a tough spot, more importantly, from a mindset standpoint, right? You know, it's like, let's say you're an entrepreneur and you go all in on a deal, right? And you were wrong. You know, you made a mistake, and one of your mistakes cost you your deal, and you were all in, and now you're broke. You can recover from that, right? That's recoverable. Mm-hmm. But if you are wayward in your life philosophy and your approach to life, right? That entrepreneur wasn't wayward, right? He just made a mistake. He or she made a mistake. He or she was going to do something and got everything right and lost all the money because they made some sort of a miscalculation, or maybe they, I don't know, whatever it was, but you can come back from those mistakes. Very hard to come back when you are kind of thinking about everything wrong. And I fear that we are far down the path in America about thinking of everything wrong. And I don't know how we come back from that. The nice thing is it's still roughly, I don't know whether it's 50-50, I'm not really sure, but there's still a significant percentage of Americans who are right thinking. I guess I mean right in many ways there, but right thinking, okay? I think it's interesting to see the flight of population from the New Jerseys and New Yorks and Illinois and Californias to the places like Texas and Utah and Florida and Tennessee. And I wonder how that will play out. I mean, nobody really knows. But it's definitely going to be conflict filled, right? Because there are people who get it and there are people who don't. They both think they're right, and there's going to be conflict because of that. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Right. So let's think about a little bit about right thinking. So you've been through ups and downs, as you explained. You had phenomenal success so early on in your age. So at that point, how was your perspective on sort of the purpose of life, sort of meaning of life? So a lot of, as you know, we're mission focused university, and we want to give purpose to our students while they go through here. And as a finance perspective, sometimes that purpose becomes kind of cloudy. So I guess most people are wanting success, and that drives a lot of us and also the students. But we're in the education world, and you've went through that really early on. So how did that shape your perspective on life, purpose, and how you view the world and the time you have on this earth?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the question. The question is itself a reflection of right thinking on your part personally and on the university's part. I would say it's purpose is everything. Okay. And it's very unfortunately very typical and very sadly typical for people to pursue careers in business in general and finance especially, where the purpose is just to make money, right? And so I'll admit I was one of those people. I grew up young, poor. Everyone starts young. I started poor, and I had a single mom. She had, while she was a brilliant woman, had no real means of creating financial nest egg for herself. And so I was driven by a purpose of creating wealth for her, for my family, so that we could live in a reasonably comfortable way. But in the end, it was about making money for me and my family. That was my purpose early on in my career. And then I kind of found myself young enough, miraculously enough, having solved for that problem. I think that I feel like blessed, but also at the time a bit confused, and it kind of threw me because I didn't have a purpose anymore. That purpose was no longer my purpose. And it wasn't because I made billions of dollars, but I made enough money that because I'm not a materialist person, I didn't really need any more money. I was pretty much set. Well, that was before I got divorced in California. I didn't plan on that. So, yeah. So maybe I was half set, but I was pretty set. And I will never forget the sense of being lost, right? I'm a person who, you know me pretty well, Dr. Park. I'm a person who has a lot of ideas all the time, because I'm thinking all the time. And it was a weird thing that I had hit a certain point of financial success at a young age. I didn't have a reason to go to work anymore because I didn't need more money. And I literally all of a sudden became empty of ideas. My brain literally fell asleep, it felt. And it was a very uncomfortable time for me. I ended up bouncing around for a little while before I found purpose in my career. And purpose in my career, if I had to summarize it, is providing value to the world through my good work, through my hard work, through the expression of my skills. Value to the world comes in many different ways, right? I hope that my presence today for those who are listening will be bringing value to the world. I would be very pleased if that were true. And my experience so far at Pepperdine has led me to believe that is the way things work. And so I'm joyful to be able to do that. I think that my involvement in my career, I actually just yesterday, 2 days ago, merged my main commingled investment fund into a publicly traded REIT, which gave my investors a really, really nice outcome. And they're now shareholders of a publicly traded REIT. They have better liquidity. They're getting a high yield. And in the 6 or 7 years that I managed their money, I produced a really wonderful outcome, averaging about almost 10% net to them per year through a very obviously difficult period. I'm very proud of that. I'm not proud necessarily that I made a lot of money or some money from my own family. That's great. But that was a byproduct of producing good outcomes for my investors. And in the process, I also funded a lot of projects, construction projects for developers. I helped create, by funding those projects, tremendous amount of jobs for people. I helped build homes where people are going to live and hopefully experience joyous family lives. I look at what I do now through the lens of not how much money did I make for my family, but what did I contribute to the world in general through my good work. And that drives me, that's joyful. And so I think that just the fact that you asked the question and that your constituents at Pepperdine, your students, your faculty are thinking about purpose and it's part of your consciousness is a great tribute to the school and something to be very, very, very happy about, because everyone who's thinking about it and is mindful of it every day is going to set themselves up for a much more joyful journey, which is all that really matters.
Thank you for that. And I'd encourage listeners, if you have any questions, please type into the chat and question box. So I think a lot of people, in some sense, wealth can be deceitful in the sense that people can spend an entire thinking life for something that ultimately might not, be the ultimate purpose, that someone wakes up in the morning and go to work. So for someone who's kind of gone through that early in life, Ethan, so when you wake up in the morning and you want to live your day, what's your mentality, and how do you advise these younger people who's in this process of wanting to build wealth and wanting to make a difference? What's the right way to think when they wake up in the morning? How do they approach the day that they should live? I guess, and especially in the kind of the current situation as you find ourselves in with the potential inflation, the housing prices. How should they wake up in the morning, and what's the right way to think? They're young. Well, they have opportunities. They still have a lot of time ahead of them to make something really great. So I'd love to hear how you think.
I'll share a couple of key things. First of all, be human. Okay. What do I mean by that? I mean, I think that the experience of life necessarily is dominated by the competition for resources that we find ourselves in. It's normal. It's just the way of the world, right? That's how the world's constructed. And in the process of surviving and trying to succeed in that competitive journey, we often lose ourselves. We lose our humanness or our humanity, right? We maybe make choices that are contrary to our ethical teachings, okay? Let me tell you this. Nothing is more important, nothing, than admiring yourself. Like, you can fool the world, right? You can pretend to be a really nice person, all that stuff. You can pretend to be a powerful person, all that stuff's an act. But in the end, everyone wakes up in the morning, looks in the mirror to wash their face or shave, and they know the truth. We all know the truth about ourselves. And in that moment, when you're evaluating yourself consciously or subconsciously, your day is set for you in that moment that you're looking in the mirror, because you're either looking at someone you admire or you're looking at someone you don't admire. And that will determine everything, literally everything. And so be human, in the face of a world that will challenge your humanity. Okay, that would be the first thing. Second thing is, and then go hand in hand with admire yourself. But make the choices in your life that allow you to admire yourself. So another one I would say is choose to be great. Okay, we look at greatness, and it's pretty impressive when we see it, and we know when we're seeing it, right? When you go watch I don't know, I'm not a big LeBron James fan, but the guy's great for sure. He's great at what he does. And so when you see LeBron James at, I don't even know how old he is at this point, still in unbelievable physical condition and bringing it as hard as he brings it, you have to admire his greatness. It's pretty impressive, right? Same thing with anyone who does anything great. The thing is, we think that greatness is a gift. It's not, it's a choice. So I would say that's a little secret that's hard for young people to fully appreciate, but every single one of you can be great. Now, you can't be great at everything. So part of it, so to find your greatness though, you have to try to be great at everything. And ultimately, you'll stumble and bumble into the thing that you happen to actually have the potential to be great at, and you'll be great. But you won't know it. You'll never find it unless you bring a great effort to everything, okay? And so bring a great effort to everything and choose to be great, and you will find what it is you're great at, and that will be its own great reward. Another one of the things I would share is always go. So inertia is a disaster, okay? And we live at a time, particularly with technology's proliferation and things like metaverse, all these other kind of things that are inviting of further inertia and are antagonistic to accomplishment. Accomplishment is kind of the first step towards accomplishment, is taking the first step, okay, which is an action step, okay? So if you're thinking too much and acting too little, you're kind of accomplished too little. Act and go. The last thing I would say is create a bubble of joy around yourself. Okay, that's something we all have the power to do. We all have the power to make a decision in the morning that I'm going to smile all day and I'm going to have fun all day. And everyone that touches me is going to be part of my party. We're all going to have fun together. Now, if you do that, well, you're going to attract a lot of people to you. And when you attract a lot of people to you, you're going to have a lot of opportunities. Now, on top of that, you'll also have a great day. And everyone will have a great day. There's no downside to that. So this kind of deciding that you're going to live in a bubble of joy, part of that, by the way, is being a good person and sharing, right? You think about selfish people or loners who approach business in a kind of me-only way. Unfortunately for them, they're doomed to never experience this bubble of joy, right? And so whatever money they might make, it's kind of an empty win, right? Because it's not about making money. It's about how did you live your day? How was your life?
Wonderful. Wow. Okay, so for most young people right now, they have this big question mark of what's happening to our economy right now. As you know, the inflation is high. There was trillions of dollars of money that's been kind of, issued to the economy. House prices in California are difficult to imagine right now for young people to think about purchasing. And so just your view on the current state of the economy. I think you said we're in one of the maybe toughest times for a lot of young people who've never experienced the past to be in right now. So I think just current state of the economy from your perspective, and how should they approach the future? Would be nice. Would be great. Well, I don't know if I can ask this question to too many people. So but I can ask this to you. So thank you for trying to answer this question. Thank you.
Well, I think that, like there was a very famous baseball player before my time, actually, in the 1950s and 60s, and he became a manager, which is how I knew him, and a Yankee catcher named Yogi Berra. And Yogi Berra has passed away, but he was very famous, particularly in New York, where I grew up, and famous for his witticisms, his unintended witticisms. He was kind of not thought to be a very intelligent man, and he would say these things that were like left people scratching their head. And one of the ones he said that I love is, it's very, very hard to make predictions, especially when it's about the future. So I think that I would go back to this. We are living in a time when, like many times, there are countervailing forces at work. And it really is impossible to predict, even on a micro level. I'll give you an example of that. Where financial markets, where housing prices, where real estate prices are going to go, even in the next year, let alone beyond that. And I'll explain to you why. So on the one hand, you've got inflation raging, right? And that would argue that rents are going to likely go up, which means that the absolute nominal value of prices will go up for things, right? That's possible. On the other hand, you have interest rates going up, and interest rates going up have a negative impact on financial asset valuations. And they also tend to, along with the inflation of costs, kind of lead a recession. And a recession has a negative impact on valuations of all financial assets, including real estate and housing prices. You also have an underlying weakness to our fundamental economy from massive debts, which are sucking tremendous amount of resources or diverting a lot of resources from our country to just servicing the debt. Mm-hmm. And as rates go up, that becomes even more of a burden on growth. You have technology, which is proliferating and growing, and has a target of reducing headcount, right? Which is kind of eliminating jobs. Mm-hmm. And that is causing a lot of, there's a lot of college grads that are working in places like Starbucks, not what they had planned, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of conflicting forces today, and it's impossible to predict which one might prevail in any period of time, short-term or long-term. Mm-hmm. You also have the societal issues that I spoke of, which I think are troublesome and weigh heavily upon what one might look towards the future in America and beyond. At the same time, people have to live, right? At the same time, every problem has a solution, and that's human nature. That's the world. The world rallies around people who come up with solutions to problems, right? So it's exciting, right? I mean, I don't look at these challenges as absolutely dark clouds that make me go home and cry and hide under my blanket. Rather, I look at them as wonderful opportunities to be creative and to have a voice in and participate in being part of the solution. And I think that's greatly rewarding, right? And I think that everyone on this call that's listening in, kind of young people coming out of school, it's an incredible time because you get to paint on an almost blank canvas. The world's never seen this combination of challenges. And so a lot of creative solutions will be discovered to meet these unprecedented challenges that the world faces. And I would be very excited about that. Now, it all will start from action. So when young people ask me, what job should I start with? What career choice should I make? I would answer to them, it doesn't matter as long as you do something, okay? And very likely what you do out of school won't be what you do for very long, you know what I mean? But it will set you down your path, right? So put one foot in front of the other, act, do something, take a job, and then continue to be in an aware state, right? Like I changed jobs many times, you know. I don't think that's a bad thing, right? You have to, again, you act, you learn, you grow, and you ask yourself, okay, I've been at this company doing this for a year. Have I learned, is the next year going to be best spent here, or should I now take myself and find another situation, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that just manage your career actively but act. Mm-hmm. That would be my answer.
Right. I have a couple of questions right now that I wanted to ask you. One is, so it looks like also you just sold your position in Mosaic as well. So I think a student asked, you have your own philosophy, an outlook, an experience, and maybe not just see yourself as a financier. And the question is, how do you go about surrounding yourself with the right people to get all the ideas that you might have get off the ground? So how do you manage trust in the people that you surround yourself with? Is one of the questions.
Yeah, well, I love people. I love being around people. I love meeting people. I travel more than probably anybody I know. And a big part of it is because I love to meet people all over, and, you know, traveling facilitates that in a unique way. Mm-hmm. I would say that my trusting people, I trust people. I'm a trusting person by nature. I would say that I have an imperfect record, as everyone who trusts does. I've not picked the best people all the time for me, or the situation, but that's okay. You know, I think the answer, the question, let me attack the question a little bit, and then I'll give you an answer maybe through that. When you say, how do you pick the right people, or how do you avoid the wrong people? That sounds to me like someone who's not trusting. Okay. And when I say trusting, it's not so much trusting in the other person. It's trusting in yourself and your ability to work your way out of challenging situations. Mm-hmm. It's not trusting in your own journey and your own destiny, right? Like, I do trust my journey. I trust my destiny. I trust myself to be resilient, and I trust myself to be resourceful. Mm-hmm. And because I trust all those things, it's not trusting the other person per se, but I'm trusting myself, my destiny, and my journey. Then I'm confident that I can make it through to the other side if I've mistrusted somebody, if I've made a bad decision on an individual. I'm not going to let that slow me down. I'd rather make I'd rather take a risk and act, and then find myself 6 months later having to act again, than having not acted for 6 months and still be looking for somebody to do something with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll contrast, you know, look, marriage is a similar one. Like, I look at my brother and I, we're similar in many ways, but we're very different in this way. I got married to my first girlfriend. I was engaged when I was 22, and I was married by the time I was 24. And the only reason I waited 2 years because my father-in-law wouldn't talk to me because I didn't get his permission at 22. So I was effectively married at 22. My brother, I got divorced when I was about 39. Mm-hmm. And then I got married again to my second girlfriend a month later, basically. Well, I didn't get married a month later, but I met her a month later, and then I got married a year and a half later, whatever. My brother got married at 50 for the first time. Okay. My brother is a thinker. You know, his tolerance for messiness is not that great. Mm-hmm. My tolerance for messiness is very, very, very high. Uh-huh. Okay. I've made a huge mess in my life because I'm an actor, like, you know, and I think that we can't be who we're not. So I don't think it would have been okay necessarily for my brother to make the choices I made, and it definitely wouldn't have been okay for me to live his life. And I think that's part of knowing yourself and saying, okay, well, how much mess can I tolerate? How much action can I really tolerate? And then you act according to, again, being true to yourself. I guess I would say this, though. I have a number of kids, and having a conversation like this with one of them who's 30. And I said to him, look, you're not like me. You know, you're different than me in many ways. Doesn't mean you have to be as live a life as risk loving as I have or messy as I have. But it would probably be good if you moved a little bit towards me. You know what I mean? Like he's on the other end. And I think that's true. I think that what I represent is something to move towards. I don't necessarily think you have to do my life. It's not for everybody, but I think a little bit of uncertainty and trust, that, you know, uncertainty that comes with trust is a healthy thing.
Yeah. So I think I have just maybe one more question to ask you. It's sort of the role of education in your life. So I think you talked about how you grew up poor and you had a single mother, but you know, and you think about education, whether it's religious education or just background, and how that's shaped you. What's your view on it? And what should an educator or educational institution be thinking about in training up a person into the kind of human being that we want to be around with and work with and live with? That's a big question, I understand, but I just wanted you to share a little bit, because I know we talk about that a lot. So what's, you know, you look at yourself and what you learned from your mother and what that means to you, and all of that would be very helpful, I think, for all of our students.
I did get raised largely by my mom, who is a very spiritual person, who is a very thoughtful and intellectual person, who introduced me to a lot of books and ideas that a typical teenager doesn't get to be introduced to. Got me to be a thinker, you know, and I think that that's very, very, it's a beautiful gift. It's the best gift that I think a parent can give a kid. And that, and she also gave me a large dose of self-confidence. And I appreciate both of those gifts very much. Even though she was an educator, you know, she was a teacher for profession. When I would come home with mediocre grades, she would sometimes say, because a part of her gift to me was self-confidence, would be, you know, oh, what does that teacher know? You know, if they knew so much, would they be a teacher? She was a teacher. And, you know, she wouldn't let the grade, even if I maybe was a little disappointed, she wouldn't allow me to kind of wallow in self-pity over the fact that I got a grade I didn't like. I would say it kind of formed my ideas of education, and which are still being formed, and it's still constantly modified. I love learning. I really do. I have a book here by me. This book I'm reading now. I don't like a lot of books, but this book called Red Notice by Bill Browder is a great book. And especially for you in business school, it's about a guy's story who created the top investment firm in Russia when USSR broke apart. It's got a lot of incredibly good ideas and information about life, about communism, about entrepreneurship, about markets. It's fantastic. I love it. And it's also really well written, and it's really engaging. So I think you learn from reading. I think you learn from mostly from experience and living in an aware state. I try to do that. I think there's a lot of reading that is a complete waste of time. I try to not waste a lot of time reading. I try to be very discriminating about what I read. But again, I think acting in your life and doing in your life in an aware state, and not being afraid to make mistakes, right? And learning from those mistakes. That's the best teacher out there. Just to me, it's always been the best teacher. There's my favorite writer is a German, well, he's a philosopher, but he's a novelist, Hermann Hesse, Hesse. And his best books in my mind were Siddhartha which I read when I was a teenager, and then I just reread it this year at age 60. And I really, really, really appreciated it now much more. I think it's a book you should read now, and then you could read again 20 years from now, and you'll get a different take on it. It's amazing. And another book called Narcissus and Goldman, which is two guys. And the theme of one of the great themes of both books is asking and answering, he does, the question of how to best live a life. And in Narcissus and Goldman, his two main characters, one chooses a monastic life of scholarship, and one chooses a carnal life of action. And in the end, it's very obvious which one was the right choice. Action is, we're here, God gives us our bodies to act, okay? If we didn't have, if he didn't want us to act, he would just put a brain in a jar and that would be it, okay? But we're here to act and interact, and we should do it with great fervor and in an aware state. And we should learn all the lessons that are in store for us. And to me, that's life.
Awesome. So we're almost at the end, but can you tell us a little bit more about the book you're writing and that's coming out? We're all very, well, I'm excited. So tell us about your book.
I wrote a book that I had been thinking about for a very long time, that I thought would be a wonderful gift to my kids and my descendants. And I wrote it as a stream of consciousness. And it was it's like it turns out it's 64 kind of life philosophies. I didn't write it in any organized way. Literally, it was as it came out. And I didn't intend to publish it. I really didn't have any plan to publish it. I kind of entitled the book What I Know, because that's what was in the book, What I Know. And I printed about 100 copies and I gave them out to family and friends, and really didn't think much about what I would do. And the response, you have one of them, is, and I got great feedback, really great feedback, and the kind of feedback which encouraged me to think that there is a value to sharing this book in some form with the world. But since it was kind of not kind of constructed in a way that lend itself to publishing or sharing with the world, I spent a lot of time in this last year just meditating about how I could reposition it in a way that would be purposeful, right? Because what one person knows is not terribly interesting to the world, especially if they don't know that person. But even if they did, it doesn't matter. Like, who cares what a person knows? We're not here to know what a person knows. We're here to learn our own lessons. So I thought about my book, and then I thought about the world. And I thought, well, we keep bouncing back as a world between isms. We bounce between capitalism or free market capitalism as on the one end, and communism or socialism on the other end. And in the end, we hit a point with each of those that ultimately leaves us unfulfilled, and it causes us to rebound as a society away from one and into the other. And I thought it's kind of silly. And so I came up with another ism called societism. And societism is just an idea, just like communism or socialism or capitalism. It's an idea that basically says the prevailing question that we need to ask ourselves as a society about anything is something good for society, or is it not good for society? And that really should always be the governing question, not is it fair, or is it deserved, or whatever crazy questions that we ask ourselves under the other isms. And so there could be a debate, by the way, as to two people can genuinely disagree about what's good for society, but at least the question is now, what is good for society, which I think is a huge step forward from where we are today. And I realized that the book I wrote really was about that. It was really laying out an intellectual foundation of how to be a person who cares about society, what are the thematic kind of foundational philosophies of a society that is that way. And so I organized I didn't rewrite my book. I ordered my book differently in a more logical way. I separated it into essentially two sections. The first one being personal attributes and how to pursue personal attributes that make you a good societist. And then the second part is kind of more societal ideas about what does that look like. And then I changed the title to kind of almost like thinking of it as the Communist Manifesto, because as you know, my book is about the same size as the Communist Manifesto. And I thought, well, if Karl Marx could write a book that's so bad with such dumb ideas, and it could be so successful, well, my book probably has a really good chance because it's about the same size and it's very well written and it's filled with good ideas. So I'm going to call it the Societist Manifesto instead of the Communist Manifesto and see how that works. And so the Societist Manifesto will probably be published over the course of the next couple of months and be available on Amazon. And I'm going to do an audio version of it, and hopefully it'll have a life of its own.
Are you going to do the audio yourself?
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, because I think that would be nice. But it's 2:23. It's been an incredible honor to have you. Thank you for being a friend to Pepperdine and to me personally. And I think we look forward to I look forward to seeing the final version of that book. And thank you for talking to us about life and not just money, or not just about success or how to do something, but I think it allowed many of us to think carefully about us and the society we live in, and how we should live every day. Sometimes living in Malibu or seeing Malibu weather every day, as you said, we're in a bubble of some kind, but many people are also lonely. Many people are also lost as to how they're supposed to live their life in this world that they live in. So I think allowing them to reflect on their journey and to be grateful is also just a huge gift. And I think more than anyone, the way you present to us allow all of us to think and question and wonder about the purpose. So it's been a huge honor. So I'm just going to leave it up to you to close this out. 1 minute close out to all of us. There's about 100 of us listening. So.
I will go back to, because you're a business school, I will go back to something that's related, because we talked a lot about ethics and right thinking and all that. So I'm going to go back to capitalism. Okay. I think that there's a need for capitalism to be explained, to be defended, to be loved, to be embraced by right-thinking people, like the kind of people that you produce at Pepperdine and that I think are represented on this phone call. Capitalism is not about making a lot of money. It's just not about that, okay? And I think that we, unfortunately, in our society, we don't have a good understanding of capitalism. So I'm going to give you guys a good understanding of capitalism right now, and you could defend it and why it's great and why it ties into everything that we just talked about. And in the end, it's all about one thing: purpose. Okay. Take the hypothetical example of a person who loves baking baked goods. Okay. And that individual loves it, loves baking, but unfortunately is terribly, terribly untalented. Okay. Terrible. Hates, is just can't make a good baked good. And so in a capitalist society, that person would try to get a job in a bakery or something like that and wouldn't get too far. If that person had a rich father, maybe that person would open up a bakery because his father would back him to make him happy. And he would not have many customers, right? People would come in and be repelled by the poor quality of his product. He would be reviled and certainly have no success. And one might look at that as saying, see how cruel capitalism is? This person's not allowed to achieve his dream because that's not what his purpose of his life is. We're not here to achieve our dreams. We're here to actually bring our very best for the benefit of society. And capitalism is taking that failed baker, that person, because he wasn't supposed to be a baker. Maybe he was supposed to be an actor or a politician or a lawyer or an accountant or an apartment developer or a lender or something else, maybe a math professor, okay? But it's telling him, capitalism is that Adam Smith's invisible hand telling him with a pretty big swat, you are not here to be a baker, okay? That's beautiful feedback because he's here for some purpose. It's just not that, okay? And that's capitalism pushing us to our purposeful life and away from our unpurposeful life where we'd be unhappy. And, you know, if you contrast that with communism, right, or whatever kind of became communism, which is just an idea that never worked, if that person's father had the right connections, then that town, he would be that town's baker. And that town would eat all of his cruddy baked goods because that would be the only baked goods they were allowed to buy because he was connected to the government, okay? And that would be a disaster for everyone. It would be a disaster for the townspeople, but more importantly, it would be a disaster for the baker because he would be hated, okay? Because he would be shoving baked goods that nobody wants down people's throats. He would be hated. He would find no happiness or fulfillment in his life, and his family name would be mud in the town, okay? So capitalism's kind. It's very kind. It may be hard, but it's kind. It pushes us in a kind way towards a purposeful life, okay? And that's capitalism. And that story is the story of capitalism. Now, if you read my book, you'll find that I'm not an unmitigated defender of capitalism because there's a dark side of capitalism because it's indiscriminating as to how we reward people. So for example, and I'm going to leave it as this, capitalism, the way it is today, doesn't discern between Pablo Escobar and Steve Jobs. They're both great capitalists and they both made a fortune of money, okay? But one preyed upon human weakness and human addiction, and one elevated human consciousness or tried to. Unfortunately, our capitalism hasn't evolved to the point of discriminating between those two and allowed for rewards to both. So I'll leave it at that, but defenders of the right capitalism is defenders of a purposeful life. And that's how I'll leave it.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for this time, Ethan. It's an honor to have you. Everyone, have a great weekend. God bless you. Hope to have you back, Ethan. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.